We've all felt it, that spark when a new action hero storms the screen, making it clear, this is only the beginning. There's a promise embedded in every slow-motion walk, every cryptic villain escape, every title card that fades to black with a smirk. Hollywood doesn't just make movies, they plant seeds for empires. Except, some of those empires never rise. This is the forgotten class of action films. Bold beginnings with no follow-through. They weren't standalone by design. Their endings hinted at war to come. Their characters walked away wounded, but not done. Contracts for sequels were drafted. Actors signed multi-film deals. In a few cases, the next movie was already in pre-production. And then nothing. Some collapsed under poor box office numbers. Others were undone by chaotic rewrites, executive cold feet, or legal entanglements no one wants to talk about. A few were simply abandoned, with no announcement, no explanation, just silence. What makes these stories haunting isn't just what we saw on screen, it's what was missing. The cliffhanger with no payoff, the universe that never expanded, the villain who never got his revenge. These weren't creative failures. They were vanishing acts. So now, we dig into the ruins, piecing together what almost was, and what never got to be. These are the 15 action films that were crafted to ignite franchises, and then vanished into the void. Fact hekjen. Stil 1997. What if the superhero craze had begun with a 7-foot-tall basketball player in a clunky metal suit? Back in 1997, Warner Brothers released Steel, a live-action adaptation of a little-known DC Comics character. Instead of a seasoned actor or rising star, they cast Shaquille O'Neal, riding high on his NBA fame and a few family-friendly movie appearances. It was marketed as accessible, urban, and optimistic, intended to launch a wave of grounded DC adaptations. But it launched nothing. The intention was grand. Steel was pitched internally as the kickoff to a line of street-level superhero films. Spin-offs were discussed. Merchandising was arranged. There were early whispers of Steel being integrated into an eventual crossover. O'Neal had even voiced interest in reprising the role. But once audiences saw it, everything unraveled. The effects were dated. The pacing dragged. The dialogue clanked louder than the costume. Steel bombed at the box office and was swiftly buried in critical mockery. Warner Brothers pulled the plug on any follow-ups, no sequels, no crossover, just a relic that never had a chance to evolve. If it had succeeded, it might have changed the blueprint for superhero cinema. Instead, it served as a warning. Not every comic book character is franchise material, but at least Steel got made. The next one got a sequel that wasn't really a sequel at all. Fact #2. The Base, 1999. A title doesn't make a franchise. Continuity does. The Base is a lean, mean military action film starring Mark Dacascos, released straight to video in 1999. It had all the ingredients of a DTV hit: rogue soldiers, undercover missions, and just enough plot to set up future entries. The final moments strongly hinted at an unresolved war, and fans expected a follow-up. They got one, sort of. In 2000, The Base 2, Guilty as Charged, arrived. But it featured an entirely different cast, storyline, and tone. Dacascos was gone. The events of the original weren't referenced. Even the military backdrop shifted into unfamiliar terrain. So what happened? Industry insiders claim the studio lost access to the original team and fast-tracked a new movie under the same name to capitalize on rental sales. The result was a disconnected sequel in branding only confusing fans and killing the potential for a cohesive universe. Instead of building a narrative, they slapped a label on an unrelated product. And with that, The Base became a ghost franchise, one that was never really born. But at least it didn't involve cybernetic soldiers and shattered contracts like what came next. Fact cancellettotre. Solo 1996. He was engineered to be the perfect weapon, unstoppable, unbreakable, and bankable. Sony had high hopes for Solo, a futuristic action thriller starring Mario Van Peebles, as a government-made super soldier who gains consciousness and rebels against his programming. Based on Robert Mason's novel Weapon, the film blended sci-fi paranoia with jungle warfare and ended with an unmistakable nod to future missions. That nod was intentional. Van Peebles was reportedly signed for multiple films, a sequel tentatively titled Solo. Rewired was in early development before the first film even hit theaters. The concept, widen the scope, introduce new iterations of the Solo program, and deepen the moral conflict. But it never moved past the planning stage. Solo underperformed theatrically and was swiftly forgotten. The script was derided as wooden. Effects were clumsy. Audiences didn't connect. Sony shelved all sequel discussions within weeks of release. Years later, Peebles revealed in an interview that the cancellation was abrupt even to him. Concept art and fragments of the unused sequel script have since leaked online, teasing what might have been. Instead, Solo walked off into the jungle and never came back. The jungle, at least, was real. The next film was neon-lit fantasy, staged in a deathmatch ring, and it too had plans for round 2. Fact hash 4. Firepower. 1993. It looked like a cult franchise in the making. Underground fight arenas, dystopian rule, and 2 larger-than-life icons clashing in front of screaming crowds. Firepower starred Gary Daniels and the Ultimate Warrior in a future where lawlessness reigns and justice is dealt out in blood-soaked cages. The concept was simple but effective. Brutal martial arts spectacle with sci-fi flavor. And the original producers thought they had a winner. They were already writing the sequel. Firepower 2 was quietly pitched at the American film market just after release. The blueprint? Expand the universe, introduce rival cities, deeper political corruption, and new fighters. Think The Running Man. But even grimmier. But it never escaped development limbo. Internal chaos and underwhelming returns shut everything down. Whispers emerged about creative disagreements, budget shortfalls, and concerns over the Ultimate Warrior's behavior on set. What was supposed to be a blood-soaked saga was cut off at the knees. All that remains are bootleg tapes, some concept art, and a faint memory of what could have been a glorious B-movie franchise. And next, a sequel that did exist, but felt like it came from another universe entirely. Fact hash 5. Cybertracker. 1994. It began as a slick, low-budget cyberpunk thriller, one that flirted with dystopian themes and the question of where humanity ends and programming begins. Cybertracker, led by Don the Dragon Wilson, followed a bodyguard-turned-renegade who uncovers a terrifying government surveillance plot. The world it built was rich with potential. Android enforcers, digital courts, corporate tyranny. It felt like the first chapter in a longer fight. And so came Cybertracker 2, a sequel that looked familiar but felt completely foreign. Though Wilson returned, everything else changed. The tone grew cartoonish. The world shrank. Threads left dangling in the first film were never revisited. New villains appeared out of nowhere. Continuity? Barely an afterthought. Fans were puzzled. Was this a reboot? A side story? A rush job? Turns out it was all 3. The sequel had a new creative team, slashed budget, and a tight schedule. It wasn't a continuation, it was an echo of the original, hollowed out for quick distribution. Whatever momentum Cybertracker had built was deleted with a keystroke. A series that started with a question, ended without an answer. But no one clung to fractured cyber dreams harder than Albert Pune, and his next film was meant to be the cornerstone of a trilogy that never materialized. Fact hash 6. Nights 1993. Post-apocalyptic deserts. Killer androids. A lone warrior searching for meaning. Director Albert Pune was no stranger to fringe sci-fi worlds, and Nights was one of his most focused visions. It starred Kathy Long and Chris Christopherson as cyborg hunters and inheritors of a broken future. The film had a mythic quality, equal parts spaghetti western and tech-noir, and it didn't feel complete. That was intentional. Pune envisioned Nights as the opening chapter of a trilogy. Locations were scouted, storyboards drawn. A multi-part character arc was already mapped out, one that would explore the origins of the war between man and machine. But the dream fell apart in the sand. Distribution problems, cast unavailability, and Pune's shifting priorities stalled production. No official cancellation was ever announced, it just faded. Kathy Long left acting. Funding evaporated. The second film was never shot. The third, never even written. What remains is a single installment of something larger, a prologue with no book to follow. And what's next? A film that was built to be a trilogy, but couldn't even get past the starting gate. Fact hash 7. TC20001993. In the early 90 seconds, the VHS market was hungry for high-concept, low-budget sci-fi. And TC2000 delivered just that. Set in a future where the elite live underground and lawlessness rules the surface. The film starred Billy Blanks as a high-tech enforcer battling cyber-terrorists in a crumbling world. It had all the hallmarks of a cult franchise: elaborate lore, stylized violence, and just enough mystery to tease a sequel. And there was more than teasing. Behind the scenes, TC-2000 was pitched as the first entry in a planned trilogy. Early cover art even referred to the film as Part 1. The sequel was set to expand the dystopia: new characters, new factions, a deeper look into the class war-dividing society. But the plan unraveled fast. Funding for the sequel stalled after disappointing international pre-sales. Rights became entangled in distribution agreements. Blanks, despite growing fame in fitness and martial arts circles, never returned to the role. The script for Part 2? Never filmed. In the end, TC-2000 became another orphaned origin story left at the gate of a franchise that never opened. The next film, though, had more than just plans. It had a title, a draft, a sequel with a pulse that flatlined anyway. Fact-hashite. Drive, 1997. It's the kind of movie that makes fans angry not because it's bad, but because it should have gone further. Drive stars Mark Dacascos as a cyber-enhanced fugitive with a price on his head, racing across the country with a reluctant sidekick. Directed by Steve Wang, the film was fast, stylish, and packed with Hong Kong-inspired fight scenes that pushed the boundaries of American DTV action. And it wasn't meant to stand alone. Plans for Drive 2. The mission were well underway. A sequel outline had been drafted. Locations were scouted. Dacascos confirmed interest. The second film would dive deeper into the biotech conspiracy hinted at in the original, introducing other modified operatives, a shadow agency, and a final mission that would force the hero to choose between his freedom and his humanity. But the green light never came. Despite critical acclaim and cult enthusiasm, the film's lack of a theatrical release crippled its visibility. Investors balked. The window closed. And Drive 2 became another phantom sequel written, discussed, half-dreamt, but never realized. Instead, the franchise idled in neutral, with no one willing to hit the gas. And then there's the Scanners saga, a franchise that tried to start over, but got lost in its own legal fog. Fact-9. Scanners. The Showdown. 1995. Scanners began as a cult body horror hit. By the mid-90s, it had mutated into something else entirely. The Showdown, also known as Scanner Cop 2, was part sequel, part soft reboot. It followed Daniel Quinn as a police officer with psychic abilities battling a new generation of mental manipulators. It was designed to revitalize the franchise with a more grounded, procedural edge. But that was just the beginning. Producers had plans for spin-offs, prequels, and a full Scanner universe. Ideas floated around for covert scanner training programs, Cold War origins, even international scanner factions. Quinn was reportedly attached for several more entries. The Showdown was meant to be the launch pad. Then everything went dark. Behind the scenes, ownership disputes halted progress. Rights were tied up between producers and the original creators. As the legal dust swirled, interest faded. Budget promises evaporated. Development ceased. The vision of a connected psychic saga was erased, not with a bang, but a buried court document. The film exists. The rest? Never made it past a pitch deck. And up next? A movie where the villain was never truly gone, but the franchise was already dead. Fact Hassan 0. I come in peace. 1990. He said it before every kill, I come in peace. But peace was never part of the plan. In I Come in Peace, known internationally as Dark Angel, Dolph Lundgren plays a cop tangled in a war he never expected, one involving alien drug dealers harvesting human endorphins. It was outrageous, stylish, and just self-aware enough to become a cult hit. And it was supposed to continue. The film's ambiguous ending left plenty of room for return. A mysterious second alien ship, unexplained technology, and subtle suggestions that Earth was only the beginning. Fan theories abounded. Some reports even mention a scrapped mid-credit stinger revealing a second wave of invaders. New Line Cinema considered building a niche sci-fi series around the premise. Different cities, different alien threats, same gritty tone. The sequel's working title? Dark Angel, Extraction. But the studio flinched. Despite solid video rentals, box office numbers underwhelmed. Critical reception was mixed. With bigger bets like Blade and Mortal Kombat on the horizon, Dark Angel quietly slipped out of focus. The plans were shelved. The aliens never returned. A universe of intergalactic crime syndicates, wiped out by the risk calculators. Still, at least I come in, peace ended with a bang. The next story ended before it ever got to begin again. Fact has known. Time bomb. 1991. Memories can be implanted. Identities can be erased. But some truths fight their way to the surface. Time Bomb is a psychological action thriller starring Michael Biehn as a quiet watchmaker tormented by visions of violence. He soon discovers he's actually a brainwashed assassin, his life a manufactured lie. The film mixes conspiracy, memory manipulation, and Cold War paranoia into something tense and oddly intimate, and it was intended to be part of something bigger. A second film, Time Bomb, Echo Protocol, was in early development, meant to follow a different sleeper agent unraveling in a parallel narrative. The idea was to create a loose anthology, connected by theme and world, but centered on new protagonists with new trauma. But then came the test screenings. Audiences found the tone uneven. Some felt it was too cerebral for the action genre. Marketing teams struggled to sell it. MGM, already facing structural changes, decided not to move forward with the series. The sequel script never made it past a rough outline. Biehn later called it one of those roles that should have gone further. But instead, Time Bomb became just that, a ticking concept that was never detonated. And the next franchise? It technically had sequels, just none that made sense. Fact Hasson 2, Nemesis, 1992. A franchise doesn't always grow. Sometimes it fractures. Nemesis was a brutal, stylish cyberpunk thriller by Albert Pune, starring Olivier Gruner as Alex, a half-human, half-machine agent caught between opposing forces in a collapsing future. The first film was a gritty, atmospheric cult hit, and it ended with a promise. Alex walking into the next battle, the war far from over. What followed was chaos. Nemesis 2, 3, and 4 arrived in quick succession. But instead of continuing Alex's story, they introduced new characters, new timelines, and disconnected arcs. Even fans had trouble parsing the continuity. One film jumped decades into the future. Another rewrote history. By part 4, Alex was barely a memory. What happened? The reality was simple. Low budgets and high ambition collided. Pune, known for working fast and cheap, cobbled together sequels from leftover footage, repurposed scripts, and new leads. There was no real franchise plan, just a title and a vague thematic thread. The result? A cinematic collage that defied logic. What began as a bold slice of cyber action became one of the most disjointed action sagas ever released. It wasn't a franchise, it was a glitch in the genre. But the next film? It started with hype, a tiger, and 2 stars who were never meant to share a screen twice. Fact Hasson 3, Double Team, 1997. Some ideas sound better in a boardroom than they look on screen. In Double Team, Jean-Claude Van Damme plays a secret agent forced to team up with NBA superstar Dennis Rodman to stop a terrorist plot. Add a Roman Colosseum, a baby in peril, and a tiger fight, and you've got one of the strangest action mashups of the 90 seconds. But behind the absurdity was a plan, one with sequels. Columbia Pictures reportedly intended to launch a 3-part franchise, pairing Van Damme and Rodman in globe-spanning missions. Early discussions mapped out Part 2 in Hong Kong and a third in the Arctic. Studio insiders said it was meant to be America's answer to Bond with sneakers. But after release, that dream collapsed. Critics pounced. Audiences laughed. Double Team made back its budget, barely, and won Rodman a Razzie for Worst Supporting Actor. Any follow-up conversations died quietly. The sequel scripts were scrapped. Van Damme moved on. Rodman didn't return to Hollywood stardom. All that's left is a strange, neon-streaked relic of what might have been. The beginning of a franchise built on chaos, undone by its own excess. Still, Double Team got a theatrical run. The next one? It barely made it past a trade show booth. Fact Hasson 4, Hologram Man, 1995. You don't always need a finished script to sell a franchise. Sometimes, all it takes is a tagline. Hologram Man starred Joe Lara as a digitized terrorist who escapes virtual prison and unleashes havoc on a cybernetic future. It was low budget, high concept, complete with exploding cars, digital distortion effects, and dialogue that bordered on parody. But what set it apart wasn't on screen, it was on the market floor. At MIPCOM, a major entertainment trade event, Hologram Man was pitched as the first in a series. Sales material promised a tech thriller universe with government holograms, underground resistance, and evolving AI enemies. International buyers saw potential. VHS pre-orders came in, promotional art even read, Episode 1. And then, silence. The film failed to gain traction in North America. Domestic distributors lost interest. Financial backers withdrew. Lara moved to other projects. The sequel, tentatively titled Code Rebooted, was never shot. The series became a standalone oddity. Hologram Man flickered to life for one brief moment, then blinked out. The final film on our list didn't just fail to continue, it tricked audiences into believing it already had. Fact Hasson, American Kickboxer, 1991. Some franchises don't die. They just split in two and pretend to be whole. American Kickboxer follows John Barrett as a disgraced fighter on a path to redemption. It's a classic underdog story, fists flying, honor at stake, and a final match that sets the tone for future battles. Everything pointed to a continuation, and a sequel did arrive. But not really. American Kickboxer 2 shares the name but not the soul. New actors, new plot, no mention of the original. It's not a sequel, it's a body double wearing the brand. And fans noticed. Confusion reigned. Rental boxes offered no clues. For years, viewers debated whether it was a rebranding, a reboot, or just an unrelated film posing as a follow-up. The truth? It was a marketing move. A different martial arts film was renamed to ride the mild success of Part 1. No franchise, no connection. Just a borrowed title and the illusion of continuity. In the end, American Kickboxer isn't remembered for its story, it's remembered for being franchise fraud. Bonus fact. The last match. 1990. You've seen soldiers with guns, mercenaries with grudges, cops gone rogue. But have you ever seen a prison break led by a football team? The last match was an oddity even by 1992 standards. The plot. A teenage girl is wrongly imprisoned in a Central American hellhole. Her father, a former pro football player, assembles a squad of ex-NFL teammates to bust her out. Their weapons? Grit, speed, and explosive footballs. No, that's not a joke. What elevates this into true franchise that never was territory is what happened off-screen. European distributors were pitched a 3-film sports action saga under the umbrella title The Power Game. The last match was to be the first. The sequels? A hockey rescue team in Russia, Ice Blitz, and a desert infiltration unit made up of baseball stars, Desert Strike. It was the Expendables before the Expendables, if the Expendables wore shoulder pads. But then reality tackled the dream. The film flopped. Reviews were merciless. Audiences couldn't decide whether it was parody or disaster. No one greenlit the follow-ups. The production company folded within the year, and the Sports Warrior franchise became a footnote in VHS obscurity. Today, the last match lives on only as a strange curiosity, a reminder that sometimes ambition isn't the problem. Concept is. They built the blueprints. They teased the next chapter. Then they disappeared quietly, completely. Each of these films carried the DNA of something larger. Sequels that were scripted, heroes left standing, villains still lurking. And yet, none of them got a second chance. So now we turn to you. Which of these forgotten action franchises do you think should have continued? Were they ahead of their time, or did they deserve to fade out? Tell us. Which Part 1 are you still waiting for? Even now.